Posing is a concept of animation storytelling. It's the spacing element of a story. If you're not sure what I mean by that, see my video, How Animation Works. Hey guys, it's Sebastian here from the Noble Frugal Studio. Let's master the art of animation posing together by breaking it down into simple parts and learning more about each topic until we grasp the overall concept. Be sure to leave me a like and let's get started. Clip Studio Paint version 3 is out now with brand new features such as layer comps, color matching to images or gradients, new filters such as pencil drawing, chromatic aberration, and an old style film camera effect. For us animators, audio scrubbing has been added as an aid to previewing our animations. Stay tuned because we're going to be using some of these features later on. Special thanks to Clip Studio Paint for sponsoring this video. You can check it out for yourself with the link in the description below. Back to the video. Let's talk about spatial storytelling. So a pose is the combination of a scale, a location, and an orientation. And a pose can be anything as long as it has these three aspects. Each individual aspect of a pose is capable of change, making posing one of the most complicated subjects we've approached in this series yet. So the goal is to place our poses in a sequence in order to stage an action. And to get there, we'll learn more about each part of a pose and then put it all together with an animated example. So to start, we can define our three parts. So a scale is a set of related measurements, or basically it's a shape. Next up is a location. Now, a location I like to define as the two-dimensional space taken up by a scale. And a pose's orientation describes the angle and direction of a scale and its parts. Let's get to know each one a little deeper, starting with a scale. Now, like we said, a scale is just a set of related measurements. A scale is a shape. So a change in scale would mean a change in a character's shape. Either a manipulation, where the mass remains the same, say like a squash and stretch situation, or a transformation, where the mass changes along with the shape. So we learned about this in my free drawing course here on my channel. You can check it out. For this demonstration, we're just going to use a simplified human scale to represent the average cartoon character. But to learn more about what goes into making character scales, check out this video here. The location of a pose is the two-dimensional space taken up by the scale. Remember to convey the illusion of depth using specific cues. Firstly, overlap. When an object overlaps another one, we perceive it as being closer to us. The second one is perspective. When the edges of an object all converge at a similar vanishing point, our brain is designed to perceive the different locations of the objects we're looking at. And the last one is motion parallax. Now, this foreground will be moving by you the fastest. Now, the midground will be moving slower than the foreground. That'll tell your brain that it's slightly farther away. And now the background will be moving the slowest. The background is even farther away. Before we move on, I want to mention that a change in location over time will create a motion path. Now, simple paths like this S curve we have here are going to be easy for your audience to follow. But complicated motion paths are very unpredictable and demand attention from your audience. So you can use different motion paths to achieve different effects in your animation and ultimately help your storytelling. And lastly, we have orientation. Orientation describes the angle and direction of a scale and its parts. It's what's most commonly thought of when discussing poses. So like a motion path, the position of a scale's appendages relative to one another creates an overall path of movement. This is called gesture, and it contains everything your audience needs to know in order to determine what's going on in your pose. So to build a great gesture, we can use the spectrum of dimensionality. We learned about it in this video here. Basically, all this means that shapes exist on a spectrum from 0-dimensional to 3-dimensional. There are 4 types of gesture according to the dimensionality of shapes. So as you can see here, we have a 1-dimensional gesture. That's called a line of action. Then we have a 2-dimensional gesture, really just focusing on their contour. So I just call this one a gesture. And finally, we have a 3D gesture drawing, which is where we're getting the three-dimensional location and orientation of each of the forms present in the character scale. I'm not really looking to be exact here. I'm just breaking them down into simple forms to build a rhythm of influence for my drawing. And this 3D gesture is called a volumetricization because it's not indicative of the exact form we're looking at. It's not hyper realistic. It's just breaking it down into simpler forms so we can understand it better. So as you can see, there are 4 types of gestures, and 0-dimensional gesture is a measurement. 1-dimensional is a line of action. 2-dimensional gesture is, I just call it a gesture. You can call it a contour gesture if you want. And a 3-dimensional gesture is a volumetricization, breaking down the subject into simpler volumes. You can work from 0 dimensions to 3 dimensions. So we can start by setting our measurements, make our line of action like that. Next, we can get our gesture in there, our contour gesture, by plotting in the major masses. And then lastly, we're going to volumetricize that gesture by turning each of these shapes into 3D forms, showing their location and orientation. Okay, so I like to work starting from the most basic type of shape all the way to the most complex across the spectrum of dimensionality. Okay, now that we know more about the parts that make up a pose, let's apply this in a real-world animation example. So scale, location, orientation. We're animating in Clip Studio now, and we already have our character scale. It's a simplified model of the human body that we looked at earlier. So using video reference, you can lay in the basic gestures of the key poses in your sequence. If you don't know what key poses are, check out this video here. I recommend keeping the gestures loose and drawing them light so you can adjust them later. Really, we're just trying to put down the overall location of our poses, thus creating a motion path. Also, side note, Clip Studio Paint version 3 added a search box to their quick access palette. So you can add whatever functions or shortcuts you like right from within the window itself. For example, I'm adding the move tool because I'm going to be moving some of these drawings around during the demonstration. Okay, and finally, I'll tackle the orientation of these poses by refining my gesture drawings. So making it very clear the direction the entire body as well as its appendages are facing with a refined rhythm of influence. I volumetricized some of the major masses, such as the ribcage and the pelvis, but I find that I don't really need a full 3D volume drawing to convey the overall direction of the body parts. I think a mixture of a 2D and 3D gesture is fine. I'm tackling this iteratively, so if I don't like a drawing, I'll just draw it over again with the goal of compiling my best drawings into one sequence later on. So let's do that now. Using the select tool, I'm copying my best drawings to a new animation folder. To place them as cells in the new folder, I'm just right-clicking a frame in the timeline within that new animation folder and then selecting the desired cell name to place it on the timeline. Then using the select tool or the move tool, I'm translating and resizing my final drawings to fit together in the same sequence. So I'm conveying a little bit of perspective just to add some interest to the animation. Let's add some life to this animation by adding some sound effects. So I'm going to click and drag this volleyball impact sound right onto the canvas until you see the plus symbol underneath the cursor, and then drop it. And as you can see, it's created a layer for our sound. And by clicking this top row of frame numbers and dragging, we can scrub the audio. So let's move this over to where the impact actually happens. It's somewhere around here, okay, around frame 6. Awesome. Now that I have a good overall idea of what I want my movement to look like, I can go in and add some intermediate poses. So I could find the frame I want to add the pose on and then select new cell. That's one way to make a frame. Clip Studio Paint version 3 has the ability to add cells to frames when you add a layer in the Layers tab. So I want to try that. Let's go to File, Preferences, Animation, and then make sure to check Add Cell to Frame when adding layer. Now when we add a layer in the Layers tab, it automatically creates a cell for us. I'll undo that. The layer that we add can actually even be a layer folder. So I add a new layer folder, and there, it adds it on the timeline. Within this layer folder, I can have a rough sketch layer, a layer for my colors. I can even have a layer for lighting effects. And this will show up all within one frame on the timeline. So very, very efficient. If you do want to get rid of a layer, you can delete it here in the Layers tab, but make sure to also get rid of it here in the timeline by right-clicking and hitting delete. Not delete frame, delete. To have them both deleted automatically, check remove cell when deleting/moving layer in your animation preferences. Clip Studio Paint versions 2.1 and later will have this checked by default. There's another animation feature I didn't get to showcase to you guys that was added in version 2, and it's when we're ready to export our animation, we can export it as a transparent GIF. So let's make sure our animation is transparent first by getting rid of the background paper. Then we'll go to File, Export Animation, Animated GIF. Find a folder you would like to save it in and hit Save. And then we have our animated GIF export settings. We can check Make Background Transparent and then hit OK. We'll get the notice that our export was complete. Now when we view it, we have a transparent GIF. Due to the compression settings for the GIF format, rough animations may come out looking a bit strange. When you add colors and other elements, your mileage may vary. There we have it, guys, a finished sequence of poses that we can pass over to the cleanup crew. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this tutorial was beneficial. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. It also helps if those questions are as specific as possible, so I or another animator will know the best way to help. Special thanks to Clip Studio for sponsoring this video. You can check out Clip Studio version 3 and even try it for yourself with the link in the description below. Shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you for supporting this channel loyally, to Owen Art and Roberto Martinez on Patreon. Thank you. Happy animating.